Okay, I want to talk about this ancient character out of Sumerian mythology called Enkidu. Enkidu is a character that appears in the written record in Akkadian cuneiform of the story of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was one of the three kings that was written about, and I believe these tablets were out of that library of Ashurbanipal. But a king of ancient Mesopotamia, and I believe it was, Uruk. His name was Gilgamesh, and he was pretty much a tyrant. Now, he was said to be part god and part man. My mythological unification theory basically equates him with the Greek Heracles and the Nordic Thor. He had, it says that he looked human, but he did not know what it was to be human. Basically, he was just very cruel to his people, and they prayed to the gods to help them. And the story is that the gods had a goddess create this wild man named Enkidu. And Enkidu meets up with Gilgamesh, but Enkidu is, like I said, a wild man, and he's friends with the animals of the forest, and he didn't want to have anything to do with Gilgamesh at first. And then Gilgamesh sends out a temple prostitute to mate with him. And once that happens, the animals don't want to be around Enkidu. Well, Enkidu at that point is convinced to go back and meet with this Gilgamesh, and they do, and they wrestle, and I think Gilgamesh loses, but they become friends after that and go on some journeys. And Gilgamesh changes because of his friendship with Enkidu. And then Enkidu dies of some disease before his time, and that causes Gilgamesh to get upset and try and look for the secret to immortality, which he is denied by the gods. But after this experience, he allegedly becomes a better king. So I want to read something. There's different versions of this Gilgamesh story, but I want to read from Myths from Mesopotamia, Creation, the Flood, Gilgamesh, and Others, translated by Stephanie Dalley and her translation of Gilgamesh. Now, there's several tablets. It's a very long story. I'm not going to read the whole thing or both versions. You could pick a copy of this book up online. But I want to read the most important part, which is the description of Enkidu. And that is that he's completely covered with hair and lives like an animal. So let me get this started. Gilgamesh, Tablet 1. Of him who had found out all things I shall tell the land. Of him who experienced everything I shall teach the whole. He searched lands everywhere. He who experienced the whole gained complete wisdom. He found out what was the secret and uncovered what was hidden. He brought back a tale of times before the flood. He had journeyed far and wide, weary and at last resigned. He engraved all toils on a memorial monument of stone. He had the wall of Uruk built, thy sheepfold, of holiest Iana, the pure treasury. See its wall, which is like a copper band. Survey its battlements, which nobody else can match. Take the threshold, which is from time immemorial. Approach Iana, the home of Ishtar. Go up onto the wall of Uruk and walk around. Inspect the foundation platform and scrutinize the brickwork. Testify that its bricks are baked bricks. and the 7 counselors must have laid its foundations. 1 square mile is city, 1 square mile is orchards, 1 square mile is clay pits, as well as the open ground of Ishtar's temple. 3 square miles and the open ground comprise Uruk. Look for the copper tablet box. Undo its bronze lock. Open the door to its secret. Lift out the lapis lazuli tablet and read it. The story of that man, Gilgamesh, who went through all kinds of sufferings. He was superior to other kings, a warrior lord of great stature. Okay, let me stop for a minute. A warrior lord of great stature. That means he's very tall. All right, let me continue. A hero born of Uruk, a goring wild bull. He marches at the front as leader. He goes behind, the support of his brothers. A strong net, the protection of his men. The raging flood, wave, which can destroy even a stone wall. Son of Lugalbanda, Gilgamesh, perfect in strength. Son of the lofty cow, the wild cow, Ninsun. He is Gilgamesh, perfect in splendor, who opened up passes in the mountains, who could dig pits even in the mountainside, who crossed the ocean, the broad seas, as far as the sunrise, who inspected the edges of the world, kept searching for eternal life, who reached Ut-Napishtim, the far distant, by force, who restored to their rightful place cult centers, which the flood had ruined. There is nobody among the kings of teeming humanity who can compare with him. Who can I say I am king beside Gilgamesh? Gilgamesh was named from birth for fame. 2/3 of him was divine and 1/3 mortal. Belet Eli designed the shape of his body, made his form perfect. In Uruk, the sheepfold he would walk about, show himself superior, his head held high like a wild bull. He had no rival, and at his puku, his weapons would rise up, his comrades have to rise up. The young men of Uruk became dejected in their private quarters. Gilgamesh would not leave any son alone for his father. Day and night his behavior was overbearing. He was the shepherd. He was the shepherd, yet powerful, superb, knowledgeable, and expert. Gilgamesh would not leave young girls alone. The daughters of warriors, the brides of young men. Okay, let me stop. I mean, this guy is raping boys and girls. That's what this is saying. Let me continue. The gods often heard the complaints. Did Aruru create such a rampant wild bull? Is there no rival at the puku? His weapons rise up, his comrades have to rise up. Gilgamesh will not leave any son alone for his father. Day and night his behavior is overbearing. He is the shepherd of Uruk, the sheepfold. He is the shepherd yet, powerful, superb, knowledgeable, and expert. Gilgamesh will not leave young girls alone. The daughters of warriors, the brides of young men, and often hears their complaints. Okay, continuing on again. Anu often hears their complaints. They called upon great Aruru. You, Aruru, you created mankind. Now create someone for him to match the ardor of his energies. Let them be regular rivals, and let Uruk be allowed peace. When Aruru heard this, she created inside herself the word of Anu. Aruru washed her hands, pinched off a piece of clay, cast it out into open country. She created a primitive man, Enkidu the warrior, offspring of silence, sky bolt of Ninurta. His whole body was shaggy with hair. He was furnished with tresses like a woman. His locks of hair grew luxuriant like grain. He knew neither people nor country. He was dressed as cattle are. With gazelles he eats vegetation. With cattle he quenches his thirst at the watering place. With wild beasts He satisfies his need for water. A hunter, a brigand, came face to face with him beside the watering place. He saw him on 3 successive days besides the watering place. The hunter looks at him and was dumbstruck to see him. In perplexity, he went back into his house and was afraid, stayed mute, was silent, and was ill at ease, his face worried, the grief of his innermost being. His face was like that of a long-distance traveler. The hunter made his voice heard and spoke. He said to his father, "Father, there was a young man who came from the mountain. On the land he was very strong. He was powerful. His strength was very hard, like a skybolt of anew. He walks about on the mountain all the time. All the time he eats vegetation with cattle. All the time he puts his feet in the water at the watering place. I am too frightened to approach him. He kept filling in the pits that I dug. He kept pulling out the traps that I laid. He kept helping cattle, wild beasts of open country, to escape my grasp. He will not allow me to work in open country." His father spoke to him, to the hunter, Uruk, Gilgamesh, his open country. His strength is very hard, like a sky bolt of anew. Go set your face toward Uruk. The strength of a man, lead her forth in the strong man. When he approaches the cattle at the watering place, she must take off her clothes and reveal her attractions. He will see her and go close to her. Then his cattle who have grown up in open country with him will become alien to him. He listened to the advice of his father. The hunter went off to see Gilgamesh. He took the road, set his face toward Uruk, entered the presence of Gilgamesh. There was a young man who came from the mountain. On the land he was strong, he was powerful. His strength is very hard, like a sky bolt of anew. He walks about on the mountain all the time. All the time he eats vegetation with cattle. All the time he puts his feet in the water at the watering place. I am too frightened to approach him. He kept filling in the pits that I dug. He kept pulling out the traps that I laid. He kept helping cattle, wild beasts of open country, to escape my grasp. He did not allow me to work in the open country. Gilgamesh spoke to him, to the hunter, "Go, hunter, lead forth the harlot Shamhat, and when he approaches the cattle at the watering place, she must take off her clothes and reveal her attractions. He will see her and go close to her. Then the cattle who have grown up in open country with him will become alien to him." The hunter went. He led forth the harlot Shamhat with him, and they took the road. They made the journey. In 3 days they reached the appointed place. Hunter and harlot sat down in their hiding place. For 1 day, then a second, they sat at the watering place. Then cattle arrived at the watering place. They drank. Then wild beasts arrived at the water. They satisfied their need. And he, Enkidu, whose origin is the mountain, who eats vegetation with gazelles, drinks at the watering place with cattle, satisfied his needs for water with wild beasts. Shamhat looked at the primitive man, the murderous youth from the depths of open country. Here he is, Shamhat. Bare your bosom. Open your legs and let him take in your attractions. Do not pull away. Take wind of him. He will see you and come close to you. Spread open your garments and let him lie upon you. Do for him, the primitive man, as women do, and his cattle who have grown up in open country with him will become alien to him. His lovemaking he will lavish upon you. Okay, I'm going to stop. It continues on. Enkidu does have sexual relations with her for 6 days and 7 nights. And then the animals don't want to be around him, so he has no choice but to go back and bring him to Gilgamesh. And they get into a wrestling match, and Gilgamesh, I believe, loses. Okay. As I said, you can pick this up and read it, but there's some more interesting parts about this kind of creature, Enkidu. And as I told you already, he was completely covered with hair. And he's huge, shaggy with hair and locks and tresses like a woman, and huge and strong. And, he basically put Gilgamesh in his place. And what's interesting, if I continue on, is there's a little bit of a story, or more in this story, about what the purpose of this creature was. I'm just going to read this a little bit. Okay. Bitterly he was weeping. Enkidu had no, and then it's blank. His hair is allowed to hang loose. He was born in open country, and who can prevail over him? Enkidu stood, listened to him speaking, pondered, and then sat down, began to cry. His eyes grew dim with tears, his arms slackened, his strength, and blank. Then they grasped one another and embraced and held hands. Gilgamesh made his voice heard and spoke. He said to Enkidu, "Why are your eyes filled with tears?" Okay, there's 29 lines missing in this tablet, but it goes on. Enlil has destined him to keep the pine forest safe, to be the terror of people. Humbaba, whose shout is the flood weapon, whose utterance is fire, and whose breath is death, can hear for a distance of 60 leagues, though, and those of the forest, so who can penetrate his forest? Enlil has destined him to keep the pine forest safe, to be the terror of people. Debility would seize anyone who penetrated his forest. So I'm stopping. Basically, it's saying that this Bigfoot creature was created to keep humans that are tyrants in line and to live in the forest and to be the shepherd of the forest. And it also, in this story, indicated that he was a vegetarian. There's a lot of people that think that Bigfoots are cannibals, but and I don't know enough about this research, but I'm just reading here what's in the Sumerian clay tablet, and it tells you the guy was huge. I've already told you that Gilgamesh is Heracles, that he was a giant. I've shown you in my other work that he wrestled and killed other giants. So Gilgamesh is the equivalent of Heracles and Thor, and probably many other names, but he was part human and he was part God. And the story of Heracles is the same thing, and that's why Hera hated him. She just disliked him, and she had ability to affect his mind, but he could not do that to her. So Gilgamesh, ends it up in ancient Iraq. And from my research, this would be one of the patriarchs of the Semites. Now, how moonbat does that sound that Bigfoot was sent to teach the patriarch of the Semites to behave himself? That's one of the reasons why I don't want to go too far off the deep end with this research, but I'm presenting what's in the text and the translations, and it basically is describing this Enkidu is very big, and Gilgamesh was also very big in stature and strong, and the purpose of this creature was to put humans like Gilgamesh in check and to protect the forest. And it states that he was more of a vegetarian and lived among the animals peaceably, but would be a terror to humans who got out of control or entered the forest and disrespected it. Now, I will also point out that Gilgamesh is also mentioned in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So let me pull that up. Although some of those scroll parts are missing, it describes him as one of the giants and talking about the upcoming flood. And I just read this, Sumerian tale talked about his time was before the flood. So it coincides, this Sumerian cuneiform tablet or Akkadian, was written in Akkadian. Well, this tale is about this half human, half god giant, king of a great stature, and it's confirmed as he's talked about in this Dead Sea Scrolls as well. Okay. Let me, like I said, Gilgamesh is mentioned in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I took a copy of the page. This is the Dead Sea Scrolls translated by Michael Wise, Martin A. Begg Jr., and Edward Cook. And, with these scrolls translations, there's parts that are missing, so they put some brackets in with, um, you know, sometimes they'll put in what they think it says or they can't tell, so they put in the periods. So, just briefly, before the flood, there was a giant or several giants that are mentioned, and this one giant has a dream. His name is Oya, and he has a dream vision, interestingly enough, of a tree that is uprooted, except for 3 of its roots. And the vision's import is the same as that of the first dream. And it says, concerns the death of our souls and all his comrades. And Oya told them what Gilgamesh said to him. And it was said blank, concerning the leader, has cursed the potentates, and the giants were glad at his words. Then he turned and left. And it says, more dreams afflict the giants. The details of this vision are obscure, but it bodes ill for the giants. The dreamers speak first of the monsters, then to the giants. Thereupon 2 of them had dreams, and the sleep of their eyes fled from them. And they arose and came to blank and told their dreams and said in the assembly of their comrades, the monsters in my dream I was watching this very night, and there was a gardeners, and they were watering 200 trees, and large shoots came out of their roots, and all the water and the fire burned all the garden. They found the giants to tell them. And then it says, someone suggests that Enoch be found to interpret the vision. It says, to Enoch, the noted scribe, and he will interpret for us the dream. Thereupon his fellow Oya declared and said to the giants, I too had a dream this night. O giants, and behold, the ruler of heaven came down to earth, and such is the end of the dream. Thereupon all the giants and monsters grew afraid and called Maweh. He came to them, and the giants pleaded with him and sent him to Enoch, the noted scribe. They said to him, go to you that you have heard his voice. And he said to him, he will and interpret the dreams, how long the giants have to live. And then it says, after a cosmic journey, Maweh comes to Enoch and makes his request. He mounted up in the air like strong winds and flew with his hands like eagles he left behind the inhabited world and passed over desolation, the great desert. And Enoch saw him and hailed him. And Maweh said to him, hither and thither, a second time to Maweh. The giants await your words, and all the monsters of the earth, if has been carried from the days of blank, their blank, and they will be added blank, blank. We would know from you, their meaning blank, 200 trees that from heaven came down. So, and this is interesting because it's talking about this giant getting up and flying in the air. It says he mounted up in the air like strong winds and flew with his hands like eagles. He left behind the inhabited world and passed over the desolation, the great desert. So, here is Gilgamesh and some other giants, Oya and Maweh and Gilgamesh, mentioned in these Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, I want to stop for a second on the reading of these ancient writings and get into the anthropological record. Now, they have found something, some physical evidence for this Bigfoot creature, in my opinion. It's called Gigantopithecus. And they claim it's an extinct genus of ape that existed 9 million years ago to up to 100,000 years ago. And they found evidence of it in China, India, and Vietnam. And they call it a hominin. And it suggests that this Gigantopithecus blackie was the largest known ape that ever lived, up to 9.8 feet and weighing 1,190 pounds. Well, if that doesn't sound like Bigfoot, I don't know what does. What's interesting to me are the teeth. Um, they were selling these Asian people, these Chinese medicine people, were selling them the fossilized teeth ground up into powder, and they were calling it dragon bones. Now, the dragon is the symbol of these ancient Phoenicians and gods. The only thing they seem to have found so far is the teeth and the mouth, some of the mouth bones. Um, some people believe that they were bipedal, others don't. Um, what's interesting, like I said, is this the teeth. Now, if you take a basic class in anthropology, you'll learn that the human mouth is more rounded, and this is more ape-like. So, but there's no real sharp teeth, and that's interesting as well. Okay, so I have a screenshot from Wikipedia comparing an average-sized man to this Gigantopithecus blackie. Look at how huge it is, and this thing. There is some physical evidence in the anthropological record out of Asia and India. So this thing existed. It's conjecture as to how big it was and how much it weighed, but I would assume that these people that made this conjecture know what they're talking about, and it fits this Bigfoot description. I know that there's Sasquatches, they call them Almas, depending on what area they are, but what I read you from the Sumerian mythology is that this creature was created to be a rival to humans that were tyrants and to protect the forest. So that's it on my talk about the ancient Sumerian character named Enkidu. Thank you.